If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my coverage of the Kristin Smart case. We're heading into week number 5, Monday, August 15th, 2022. And we start off today with J.T. Camp, the DA investigator. He's back again. I'm pretty sure this is like the 5th time that he's been on the stand.
Week 5 of the Kristin Smart murder trial saw more testimony as an investigator and an expert witness were questioned today.
So he went over photos showing the interior and exterior of both Paul's dorm and Kristin's dorm. So Santa Lucia Hall, which is Paul's, and Muir Hall, which was Kristin's. Camp identified areas such as bathrooms and other common areas in both of the dorms. He was only on the stand for a hot second. I guess that they needed to clarify so people could visualize the layout. There was some confusion apparently. And I'm also catching on to his role now. He's like the guy in between the acts of the play who sets the stage, paints the picture, explains the setting, so it all makes sense when the next act begins. Remember, the courtroom is like their stage. Who do you feel has the best act so far? I can't believe we're already in week number 5. But a lot of missed days, as you know, with all these jury problems. How do you guys think the prosecution is doing so far? I give him 2 thumbs up so far. And what do you guys think about Sanger, the defense, or Misek? To me, Sanger seems bumbling at times. And Misek, he pops up here and there, but I almost forget about him because he's so scarce. And one of the things that Camp pointed out that had changed since 1996 in the common areas of the dorm is that they no longer have big screens and that payphones are no longer in the common area. Remember payphones?
During cross-examination, there was some noticeable tension between Camp and Paul's attorney, Robert Sanger. Sanger asked about whether or not any changes had occurred between 1996 and when the pictures were taken in June of 2021. At one point, Sanger asked Camp if he made some notes about the dorms during his own time living there in the early 90s, but quickly withdrew the question. Camp told the jury that he'd been in both dorm buildings during his time as a student at Cal Poly. The rest of the day was spent with dog handler Adela Morris. Deputy DA Christopher Pavrell spent a couple of hours having her lay out her qualifications and experience. She and 2 of her dogs were called to help in the search for Kristin Smart in June of 1996.
I'm actually pretty excited about today's testimony with one of the dog handlers. These dogs are all specially trained with their own unique alerts, which was discussed in court today. And as part of the blind procedure, when they searched the dorms, there was 0 information regarding location given or the reason for the search. The handler wasn't given any information. Of course, the dog didn't know what they were searching for either. She was assigned originally to search a reservoir in the area, and then her and her dog Choya went on to search the dorms. And Choya was trained to jump on the trainer, Mrs. Morris, and then lead to a target scent. Once Choya was in Santa Lucia Hall in Paul's dorm, she ran down the hallway, and according to Morris, quote, she immediately made a U-turn and started concentrating on some of the doors. Morris, Choya's handler, said she opened the southwest door of Santa Lucia Hall and ordered Choya to, quote, find human remains, end quote, while Morris stayed back at the entrance. At first, Choya started at full speed and then became, quote, very methodical and slow, sniffing carefully around the cracks of doors and door handles, end quote. I don't know about you guys, but this type of evidence is fascinating to me. Dogs are so incredible. My daughter is actually a dog trainer, and she's always teaching me about the amazing things canines are able to do with proper training. Choya wandered inside room 128. The door was unlocked and then opened, and Choya was again given the command to find human remains. Choya was extremely focused and went to the left side of the dorm right away. Morris went on to say that Choya was literally vacuuming up the scent. She said that told her that her dog had her target odor, and she's trained to find the strongest scent source. Choya came back, jumped on Morris, and continued to show her the left side of the room. Morris said Choya was mainly interested in the bed. Quote, I would say at least a dozen times she showed me that bed. She was very enthusiastic. The alert was not on a specific spot, but the bed in general, end quote. Morris said the intensity of the scent was obvious by the way Choya was jumping so hard. She was using Morris's body to jump off of, and she was jumping all the way to her hip. After redirecting her dog to the right side of the room, there were 0 alerts on the right side of Paul's room. Back on Paul's side of the room, Choya also showed interest in Paul's desk area. Morris now went and got her second dog, Sergei, who had been waiting in her vehicle while Choya searched. Another officer restrained Choya as Morris took Sergei to search the dorm. Similar to Choya, Sergei basically ran down the hall, made a U-turn at room number 128, and again, this new dog alerted on the left side of the room, the bed to be specific. Next, Choya was taken to Muir Hall, Kristin's dorm. Choya did not show any interest at Muir Hall. Paul's mattress was removed. Choya came back in room number 128, and she continued to alert on Paul's empty bed frame.
The dog was, quote, very clear. She did not alert to human remains in any other dorm in the building.
All right, let's head into the cross-examination of Morris by Sanger, Paul's defense attorney. So Sanger asked Morris to explain about CARTA, and Morris explained it's a private organization deployed by the Office of Emergency Services, which is what she works under when she's working with the dogs. She admitted that she was an unpaid volunteer, and Sanger focused on a letter Morris wrote to another dog handler named Andy Rebman after the dorm search. Morris said she sought Andy's advice because investigators asked her what substances they should look for when evaluating the mattress. Morris spoke how the dogs had to be recertified every year and how Choya never failed her recertification. Sanger asked Morris about successful cases, including body parts. Morris said she didn't understand the question, and Sanger said, in the Kristin Smart case, you didn't find anything. Prevail objects, which was overruled. There was another mention here of Susan's house in testimony today. You all know how I'm dying to know if Kristin was buried at Susan's at one point. Morris and her dog searched Susan's house in 1997. She had no idea whose home it was at the time. Her dog showed interest near where the trash cans were kept, but did not actually have a full alert. She went back to Cal Poly in 1998 and also in 1999 to search the performing arts area and an administrative building. No dogs alerted on either of those visits. Morris did admit to discussing the search with other handlers on the way home from the search. Sanger asked if it was important to avoid bias. Morris said her reports are facts, not opinion. Quote, I did this, the dog did this, end quote. Sanger pointed out the dog searched a dumpster, even though Morris doubted accuracy for a dumpster search. Sanger said her dog was licking the bottom of the dumpster, and Morris pointed out that licking is not the same as alerting. Morris said her dog alerted to a plastic bag in the dumpster. She gave the bag to investigators, and she also explained dumpsters can confuse dogs, since there can be menstrual products in the dumpster. Hours were spent laying the groundwork regarding the dogs and their handling experiences and their qualifications, and Morris had spent more than 30 years training dogs to detect the smell of human remains. Her dog Choya was the first dog ever certified for that type of search, and Morris says real human remains are actually used to train the dogs, including bones and teeth. She explained how negatives are also used for training on what not to alert on, such as semen, baby diapers, animal products, used Kleenex, live human scent, and beef. Morris shared it only takes very little blood for a strong alert, even if the blood has been cleaned off of the surface with cleaning products or disinfectants. Morris has done over 300 law enforcement type searches over all her years. In the last 15 years, she specialized in finding human remains. Her dog, Choya, worked from 1995 to 2000. I think I mentioned that. And some of her successful cases were a 10-year-old homicide victim, the remains of another kidnapping victim, plane crash victims, a chemical plant explosion, and many more successes. Before wrapping it up, Paravel asked more jury questions. Yay, you know I love the jury questions. One of the questions was, would the dog alert to blood on a bandage? And the answer was yes. The other question, actually there were several other questions about whether the dog failed certification if they have a false positive. And Morris explained that yes, it would disqualify a dog if they had false positives during their certification.
I'm a Brooklyn girl. We've never had cadaver dogs on any case. So it's a little, not once ever have I ever had a case. And so I'm always fascinated when we follow these cases where a lot of the evidence is these cadaver dogs that sniff, the human remains. And so it's something we've never used that evidence. And so I find it a little, I'd have trouble as a juror using that evidence because it's not something I'm as comfortable with. And I think it's going to be a big problem for the DA in terms of establishing that he's the person that killed her.
She's just not having it. And I understand her view, seeing that she's lived in New York and hasn't seen cases herself in court, but it's very common, actually, to use these in court cases around here in California. I think it's not going to be such a struggle as she thinks, but everything's perspective and experience. I'm sure she's aware that these dogs have been used in all kinds of tragedies of common knowledge, like 9/11, Oklahoma City, Lebanon, the list goes on. And those were not just rural locations. And some of them are trained to find live people, some detect remains, some find bombs, some find drugs. It goes on and on and on. Just depends on the training. And the science is still out on how they do this, but it's been proven in the results that somehow dogs have these extra skills, and we know that their sense of smell is off the hook, especially compared to a human. As illustrated here, where you can see it states that dogs have 300 million more olfactory receptors versus a human who only has about 6 million. And the area of a dog's brain devoted to scent is 40 times greater than a human.
It's funny, are cadaver dogs not allowed in your jurisdiction, or is it just something that they don't do by practice?
I mean, we've had dogs involved in, companion dogs. That is the only time I think I've ever seen a dog at the DA's office is when they were there for, to help young victims and whatnot. I think we're in the city, so we're not in a rural place or, where they're more useful. And by the way, remember, it's not like every day that you have a no-body homicide, and
right.
Cadaver dogs really are effective or more effective in that type of case versus a case where the body is actually recovered, because then you know where the body is. But I don't know. It was a new thing when I started doing legal analysis, seeing a lot of cases using this type of evidence.
Yeah, and in a case like this where there is such a lack of forensic evidence, you could understand why they just want to use anything and everything that they can. One thing I will say about the cadaver dogs in this case that I think makes it a little more powerful for the prosecution is that, according to the reports I've read, they brought in several dogs. So it wasn't one dog. You can't just say, well, that dog wasn't trained properly or something. They brought in several. I think it was about 4. and that they all signaled only to his dorm room bed and to no other dorm rooms. So it was almost like they ran a control test and an experiment. They didn't signal to every bed. They didn't signal to any other bed but his.
She sounds very close-minded. She is just not having this canine evidence.
One of the questions I would ask or want to know is whether or not the handlers knew which dorm he occupied. If I was the defense lawyer, I'm certainly going to want to, talk about that, because if they did, there could be an argument that, by the way, even unintentionally, that the dog handler could have led them to a certain location. And so I think, look, the cross-examination of any of the handlers, because you can't cross-examine the dog, will be interesting, in terms of how they're able to try to manipulate the cross-examination to get out that there could be some potential bias, and where that falls with the jury.
Excellent point. I mean, because dogs are so in tune to the body language of their handlers. That's an excellent point. If you knew that he should be signaling here, you may have even subconsciously been behaving in a way that let that dog know that was important. Interesting.
This was covered in the trial, and it was definitely a blind search. Good to know the juries would have been wondering otherwise. The science is still out onto how this all works, but it works.
And as part of questioning, Sanger read a portion of a research paper Morris contributed to. The paper said a dog's alert should be most likely used to establish probable cause and not as direct evidence of a body. Morris testified the paper was written at a time when there was less knowledge about what dogs were able to do, and added additional research has now been done. She also admitted that scientists do not agree or do not know exactly what dogs are responding to that allows them to identify decomposing bodies.
The other thing, and tell me if you've experienced this or your thoughts on this, but jurors love to hear something come out of the defendant's mouth. Whether that's the defendant testify, whether that's the defendant giving a statement to a detective, or the defendant talking to someone else. And if that somehow shows them to be a liar, I feel like that really kind of cooks their goose. You know what I mean? It's like, you may be doing well with a case, but if it turns out that guy's lying about something, it's almost like that's enough for them to hang their hats on it.
I absolutely love the way that he put it. Paul definitely did cook his own goose, that's for sure.
Reason that we tell our clients not to say anything, no matter what it is. We tell them keep your mouth shut because the most innocuous things can get them in trouble. And so I want you to think about what this case would look like had he never said a single solitary word. We would not be here right now because, as far as I'm concerned, half, if not more, of the prosecution's case depends on the lies he told and the inconsistencies. And so, when you have especially a case this old and you have the jury hearing that at the time he told various inconsistent stories, the jury is brought back to that time period and asking themselves, why would this young man lie if he was not involved?
Yeah, I completely agree. I tell all my clients, I don't care how innocent you are. The police are not looking to help you out, okay? They are looking for you to mess up on something and to trip you up on one little detail. And that could be a detail that's totally unconnected to what it is that they're investigating you for. But if that comes out that you lied about something, you're done for. The jurors don't like liars almost as much as they don't like murderers. You know what I'm saying? It's like that could be enough in this case, and I agree with you.
It's crazy to think Paul being the liar that he is what, according to these experts, will probably help the case the most. And boy, was he a horrible liar. It's ridiculous.
It's funny because sometimes the lie is what gets them convicted, even though the reason that they lied has absolutely nothing to do with the crime. And it just kind of goes along with what you were saying.
Once Paul realized his lies were getting him in a tangled mess, he decided to plead the fifth, and he's done so ever since. I wonder if they'll ever talk and tell the truth. That's what I always hold out hope for. At least tell us where she is.
The same with clients who want to take the stand, and jurors want to hear from them. Every time you do voir dire, Every single juror says, well, if I was innocent, I would want to tell everybody about it.
Right.
But you put somebody on the stand and you put a experienced prosecutor cross-examining him, and you trip up on one thing, or one thing sounds evasive, or you sound confused about what, you're done for. They've heard from you. You're accused of this crime. They've heard from you. They think you're not telling the truth, and therefore you must be guilty of whatever it is you're accused of.
No, especially, and even though the burden's not on your end, it becomes,
right.
The burden suddenly switches, even though legally it's not supposed to.
100%.
I feel like it's extremely doubtful they will get up on the stand, and I'm really wondering what Susan's going to do when she goes up there, since it was ordered that some way, somehow, she has to go to the stand. I'm expecting she'll do the same and plead the fifth. There's been so many delays and problems with the jury, and so far there are 5 remaining alternates on Paul's jury and only 3 left on Reuben's jury. They each originally started out with 8 alternates. So Paul has lost 3 and Reuben has already lost 5. Remember how we heard the juror dozed off during last week? Check this out. A bailiff had to make a juror stand up today to help them stay awake during testimony. He literally went over and tapped him on the shoulder and made the juror stand up. Him or her, I don't know. Wow. Do you think it was Paul's or Reuben's jury? My little slide I put here might give you a clue of to which jury I think it is.
The trial, which is slated to last until October of this year, has seen multiple delays, most recently this week when the case was delayed for an undisclosed juror issue. An alternate was sworn in to sit on Paul Flores' jury, and the case continued the following day on August 10th.
Now let's talk some more forensics.
Let's talk about the forensic evidence in this case, though, or more importantly, the lack thereof. There's no DNA, though there's signs of what they believe to be blood in very important areas, but there's no hair fibers, fingerprints, carpet fibers. Is the lack of forensic evidence of this in this case going to be a problem for the prosecution?
It's a no-body homicide case, and I hate saying this is the benefit, but the fact that it happened so long ago certainly lets a jury know that this is not someone that fled, because if they had, they would have been seen by now. And so at least it establishes, at least to the jury, that this person is no longer alive. But obviously, anytime there's forensic evidence that links to the defendant and potentially his father to the case, it's going to make the case stronger, especially because it's been so many years.
I'm going to disagree once again with these experts because what they said here is not entirely true. There was fibers found in the supposed grave at Reuben's house. There was human blood found in that same hole. And even at the dorm, there's a list here, the fibers and so forth, the evidence collected. Those are forensic evidence items, however, not specific DNA saying it was exactly Kristin. Nowadays, expectations are extremely high where people expect it all to be signed, sealed, and delivered with DNA and all the answers and everything wrapped up in a pretty bow. For a case that's this old, I feel like they have more than enough. I do understand some people disagree with my opinion there, but the bottom line is only the jury gets to decide.
By the way, you also kind of have to prove potentially how she died. Was it an accident?
Yeah.
Was it intentional? And when you don't have the body and you don't have any blood or DNA, it's harder to prove how this person died.
Yeah, absolutely. It's first-degree murder, right? You're right. How do they establish that mens rea? I don't know as the defense if they're even going to go. Doesn't sound like they're going anywhere near that, but the argument needs to be made to the jury, hey, by the way, they haven't proved this was intentional. You make an excellent point there.
Now this, I've always considered a strong possibility since the very beginning. I believe in my heart that Paul most likely killed Kristin while trying to rape her, either by accident or during the struggle while she was trying to fight Paul off. She was quite a bit bigger than him, and she was a strong girl. Of course, he was trying to sexually assault her, which in itself is another violent crime. The way Paul dealt with this, to me, is just more indicators of how stupid he is. Had he just come forward and said it was an accident, he could probably be out by now. It is 26 years later. He wouldn't have lived under this cloud of suspicion, or his family either, and all the unknowns. Especially, where the heck is Kristin? Paul wouldn't be one of the most hated guys in Slow County at this point. The more I think about how with our screwed up legal system, even if it wouldn't have been an accident and he actually did it on purpose, he would still probably already be out of prison had he confessed way back in 1996. Kristin's family would already have laid her to rest 26 years ago. Like it was said earlier, Paul cooked his own damn goose. So this is where we ended up 26 years later, and hopefully justice will prevail. I want to do another shout out. This time the shout out is to Sarah Larson. In her comment, she mentioned that they could be simply skin cells, which got me digging deeper. Again, trying to be a scientist, which I'm not. And I found these slides. And it basically talks about how HMEC are specific to females. We've talked about that before. And if you separate the word epithelial cells in the graphic here, it lists skin, blood vessels, organs, including the urinary tract. All those cells are in those locations. They're normally shed and eliminated by urine. Now that didn't cross my mind. Possibly urine stain. See what I mean? Stains are not just blood. These cells are found throughout the body, and they're very widespread, as the slides state here. Putting the definition together, mammary epithelial cells line the milk ducts in the breast, as Sarah mentioned in her comment when she mentioned the mammary.
Flores is accused of murdering Stockton native Kristin Smart. His father, Ruben, is accused of helping him hide her body. Their trials are being heard at the same time, but they are being tried separately.
Adela was still testifying at the close of court.
Morris is expected to be on the stand again tomorrow morning.
Court will be dark Friday, August 19th, Monday, August 22nd, and Tuesday, August 23rd. And I got to tell you, I look forward to the break, including an emotional break. This has all actually been hitting me a lot harder than I ever expected. It's just such a senseless tragedy. As always, justice for Kristin.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for
Bring
watching.
my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still